Okay, so we are recording now, and again, this is just our virtual faculty lounge on open educational resources. And to lead us in discussion this week is Devin Savage, our Dean of Libraries, and joining him, Stephanie Fletcher, the head of Metadata Discovery and Technical Services. Go ahead.
All right, I am sharing the screen. I believe everybody can see this. Give a shout out if you cannot see it, but otherwise I'll just plow right ahead. Yeah, I think we got a nice little opportunity to talk about OERs and what they are, what that means, and why they are important. As Lauren mentioned, I'm the Dean of Libraries. I've been at IIT since January of 2014. Came here from Northwestern before that. Stephanie Fletcher has been here just a couple of months and is new to IIT, but she's been working in this area for some time. In her previous stints at Dominican University and the Art Institute of Chicago. So with that, go ahead and get into the discussion. What is OER? So it refers to open educational resources, and that can consist of textbooks, videos, handouts, problem sets, all sorts of other sort of what you might call ancillaries, and even syllabi count for this. One of our first conversations with faculty, they noted how they were sharing their syllabi sort of freely on GitHub or other places. Spark has a really nice definition here about open education in general, as the Society for, the Scholarly Publishing and Academic Resources Center is what Spark is. And they define it as encompassing resources, tools, and practices that are free of legal, financial, and technical barriers and can be fully used, shared, and adapted in the digital environment. They have a line about it that I really like, which is that open education maximizes the power of the internet to make education more affordable, accessible, and effective. So it's this nice little center of education, technology, and copyright that we're leveraging to make the educational experience and the achievement and retention all improve over time. So why is it important? Well, there's a couple quick graphs here I want to share with you. One of the things is that, a few years ago, it was really people were really starting to note just how expensive textbooks had been. And the library world had been noticing this for a little while as we had increasingly come under more and more demands to provide textbooks in some way, shape, or form, or a textbook reserve, which we have done here for undergraduates at the library. But you can see that there's just dramatic prices above overall inflation, above CPI, and the way that textbook prices rose over time. So especially many instructors have not dealt, have a very different perception of what textbooks actually cost and what their impact is upon students here. One of the nice things about this the second graph is you can see how college textbooks were on a path that actually over time was eclipsing college tuition at one point and was rising even more rapidly than hospital services, but leveled off shortly before the pandemic. There started being some variability to this, and this is actually when OER resources started to be introduced and provide some downward pressure on college textbook prices. Of course, the pandemic helped, really, gain a little bit more focus in all this and help maintain that. But so there's been some good starts already that we can see in sort of a national sort of level. But this is a really interesting set of graphs for me. But going back to sort of some of the ideas about why this is important, of course, we from the library information science world care about it because we care about access and inclusivity, and particularly about equity. Textbook prices, continue to rise, and financial aid does not generally cover the costs of this. Financial aid, there are some financial aid packages that cover textbook costs, but usually they are not covered. And the textbook costs are usually the last thing that students pay for. So almost always goes in a credit card, or they take particularly self-damaging approaches to addressing their these costs. I think OER particularly aligns with the idea that technology can improve teaching and learning, and the textbook costs should not be a barrier for our students' achievement or retention. And then when students do have access to quality educational materials, their achievement rises. And we've got some links in the back that you can kind of click through to see the correlations between student access to textbooks and the increased persistence and achievement. But to me, this is also a matter of efficiency. And we'll talk about that a little bit when we talk about the advantages for students and for faculty. But I think, one of the basic points is we did a large student survey here at the library right before the pandemic. And we found that, students, the students went to the college bookstore as like the 5th place they went to look for. Access to textbooks, and even before that was just simply not buying required textbooks, not recommended textbooks, actual required texts for the class that they just wouldn't buy. And if you think about the sort of impact that has with students literally not starting on the same page as the rest of their cohort, and how that affects certain students, you can begin to see like the sort of enormous advantages in equity and efficiency that using OERs might gain. So I wanted to break into this conversation a little bit. I just want to frame this a little bit. What we found when we first started talking to faculty about this issue at the library is, in our early conversations with the UFC Library Committee, as we found a lot of, number of faculty were already using OERs. They just weren't calling it that. What they were doing were finding ways to limit additional costs on their students, or find ways that students could easily access the material that they needed. And so they were using, phrases like open source, or, specific types of platforms that, like Merlot in the past, that had offered free courseware or freeware. And as part of a later curriculum mapping exercise where we did a wide syllabus review of across the entire campus, we found even more cases of people using open educational texts or resources as core required pieces of the education. And often these work best in sort of the introductory courses. And we actually talked at Academic Council with the blessing of the provost and various deans about launching a #OER tag in the catalog for courses that could be identified as OER courses, where students would know that they weren't responsible for any further costs beyond the basic tuition and fees that they already paid by taking this course. So those are some of the conversations that we had around time. Now, I know that we've got a couple of folks in here that teach classes regularly. But I just want to throw open the conversation to start out with, and just ask people here, and feel free to just kind of pipe up about how you try to limit additional costs on your students, or you can type in the chat. But I just kind of wanted to stop sharing for a second and give people a chance to like speak up about, how we try to limit the, additional costs on the students themselves.
I bought 2 extra copies of the textbook that I use, which I just checked the price of. It's $41 on Amazon, which isn't, by textbook standards, isn't that expensive. But really, if you saw this book, it's paperback. It's not that thick. To me, it seems like $41 is still a lot of money for this particular book. But I bought 2 extra copies and I put them on reserve in the library. And I told students that they're there.
Excellent. Yes.
For my classes, at least, I've found that at least one of my upper levels, there's not really a great like textbook just in existence that I know of for it. And so I wind up just downloading all the things I want them to read and throwing them on Blackboard and saying, here they are. So that's one thing I try to keep in mind. And then also making sure I don't make my students print things to come to class.
Excellent. Yes. Yeah. The price and trouble of printing is can be a hidden cost as well. And yeah, the trying to share things through Blackboard is often a really helpful thing to do. It does bring to mind one of the other challenges that we often have as instructors, which is sort of ensuring that we're in copyright compliance within the classroom, that we don't make ourselves a visible target in any way. So that's one of the other sort of challenges that the copyright innovations regarding open educational materials helps us avoid. And there are other things, the ability for us to take a widely accepted textbook from, say, OpenStax, and additionally like edit it, change things around, provide why am I blanking on the word? Translations, providing translations when necessary. These are things that are additionally helpful and can really help us as in terms of international education in a way that just weren't available to us before. All right. Anyone else have anything to add about specific examples of trying to limit or curtail costs for students in the class?
Devin, just a comment about copyright and using materials that are legal. A lot of times, students will look for other places. They don't want to spend money on the textbook at the bookstore or on Amazon, and they'll end up illegally downloading the book from a website somewhere, or a video from YouTube that was posted illegally. And so if we're using these resources that are, yes, they're already online, but they're there legally, and you can legally download them, edit them, and reshare them, then that helps protect the students too.
So when I was teaching general learning strategies, I encountered a couple of students who had trouble affording their textbooks. And I suggested to them that they look for the previous edition of the book, which you can get much more inexpensively, and buy that. And, as best as they could, try to figure out what if there were any important differences. But I said, for the money, it'll get you pretty close to what you need.
Yeah, and that's absolutely. So whenever we buy textbooks, we usually try to have a conversation with the instructor about versions, about editions. And that's certainly something, far, in the long decades past when I was an undergraduate, I certainly did, was, try to buy find other versions or previous versions. I did have the experience of getting pretty openly mocked by my professor at the time for using a very old version. Yeah.
Shame on him, right?
Yeah. Well, and to be frank, the the translation that was far off. Meanings were actually lost as I was, from what I was reading, to what the actual content that he wanted to convey was. But that said, but the previous edition is one of the ways in which students do try to save money for themselves. To Stephanie's point, downloading illegal copies from places like BitTorrent or pirate sites, that carries risks to them, I would say, even less than copyright risks of legal action in that way. The real risks and the much I would say something that's not really talked about or understood as well. The real risk is about malware, especially in the current age. I mean, we are under enormous pressure from malware and ransomware attacks across the higher education academy. And this is something that is a great backdoor into a lot of our environments, is when people illegally download things through these illegal sites. So this is a significant cybersecurity issue as well. All right. Any other contributions or thoughts sparked about the ways in which we try to curtail costs for students? All right. Well, we'll move on to the next section. Let me share my screen again. All right, and I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie to talk a little bit about how other organizations are engaging with promoting OER.
Thank you, Devin, and apologies for the echo at the beginning, but now I'm on an HP that Zoom is happy to work with. So I'm glad that you can all hear me and I can see me as well. So yeah, I'm Stephanie Fletcher. I'm happy to be here today, the first time presenting to faculty at Illinois Tech since I started at the end of July. And I'm going to talk about some other organizations and how they engage and promote, engage with and promote OERs. One example are colleges and universities. Many organizations are establishing programs that promote the use, adaptation, and authorship of OERs. One example is Dominican University, and that's my previous institution. And I'll talk about the program that I co-founded there just in a few minutes. Secondly, we have organizations like the American Association of Colleges and Universities and other organizations that support higher ed. These are offering programming that help universities to launch or expand OER initiatives. For AAC&U, one example is the Institute of Open Educational Resources. And this is a program that schools apply to and get accepted into. It's an academic year program, so it lasts about 9 or 10 months. And they provide mentors. So it's a mentorship program. There's workshops and webinars and day-long conferences done remotely on OERs to teach faculty and other stakeholders at universities about OERs and how to promote them and basically how to expand existing or get off the ground OER initiatives at those schools. So this is something that I was involved in at the very beginning at Dominican University. They're doing it this academic year. But this is just one example of programs that have been designed to help schools and help people at those schools to really expand and learn about, expand the use of OERs and learn about, ways to find and use OERs. Another example is the Affordable College Textbook Act. This authorized a grant program to support projects at universities. Oh, Devin, I just lost. Can you share again, please?
My fault. Sorry.
Thank you. Anyway, the Affordable College Textbook Act has helped universities to create and expand the use of open textbooks with the specific goal to achieve savings for students. And so in this way, you have politicians working at the state and federal level, and of course, many of us working at the local level as well to help students better afford textbooks. So I'll just spend a minute or two talking about the program at Dominican University as an example of really a grassroots program that grew out of the library. A colleague and I, a librarian, co-founded this program in the fall of 21, and our first cohort started in spring of 22. We called it the Affordable Materials Integration Program, and we started with 7 faculty who applied and were accepted into the program. And the goal was to encourage these faculty and help them to discover and then use OERs in their courses. So we asked them for a couple deliverables, and in exchange, we were able to offer a stipend. The stipend was $1,500 per faculty person, and it came from a Title V grant that Dominican already had. So one sort of hurdle for these types of programs is finding money if you are offering a stipend or another incentive that is sustainable, budget that will be there every year. That's always a challenge with new programs like this. But we asked for a couple of deliverables from our cohort of 7 faculty. One was to attend a workshop on OER to learn more about it. And our state library consortium, which we call CARLI, does offer this type of workshop about every month. And so there's always an opportunity for faculty to learn in that capacity. We asked them to review a textbook that was published in the Open Textbook Library. This helped them become more familiar with open access textbooks, but also to think critically about how they might be able to use that in their own courses, or how they might improve upon it. They read the OER Starter Kit, which was published by Iowa State University. And most importantly, we asked them to flip a syllabus to at least 80% affordable materials. So this looked like materials that they had previously asked students to purchase. Instead, they had to locate and replace those materials with OERs or other low-cost materials to at least 80% of all the materials that they were using on their syllabus that year or in that semester. And then they taught the course the following semester or maybe 2 semesters later. And then, of course, we asked them to really be advocates for OER on campus and present their experience to their colleagues in a faculty forum. So this was one way to, again, really expand that program, expand the knowledge of OERs across the campus. And in fact, the following semester, we had double the number of applicants. So we had 14 applicants, whereas the semester before we had 7. So certainly it proved to be something that the faculty saw a need for, and they were hoping to build that capacity within their own schedules and their own workload to make it happen in order to help the students and create more affordable classes. So I will move on from there, and I think, Devin, your slide is next.
Great, thank you. So there's a few advantages for students, as I mentioned earlier. One is OER has significant advantages for online instruction. So obviously, if you have an online course or a hybrid class where some students are completely online or remote, us having the textbook, the physical textbook at the library does nothing for that student. there's no access we can provide that student. So having, having an ebook that is not a subscription, one of the things that the pandemic brought out were two huge snags in education that people had not previously foreseen. And one is that many, the vast majority of textbooks are not available electronically. So many textbooks were only available physically. And there was no opportunity for even the most well-resourced academic libraries or universities to get access to those ebooks. And then there were further sort of restrictions from publishers who didn't want to let libraries, universities buy bulk access. We wanted to make sure that students only bought them individually, or even more concerningly, subscribe to them individually. So the students had no ability to keep a digital copy of those textbooks, like they would a physical copy going forward. So there, right off the bat, there's really nice advantages to having open educational digital textbook resources. And then there's all the copyright things that I mentioned earlier, that Creative Commons licensed open textbook can be reused, remixed, can be edited, translated, added narration to. All sorts of accessibility concerns can be addressed across this. And there's some links at the back that you can click through, but some good examples of improved student achievement, improved equity outcomes for students. This is one of the things where what seems like a very small amount of money, like $150 per course or so, might seem like a very small difference when you consider the overall cost of tuition. But when you consider the different levels of equity, this is a really great leveler. This is a great way to start people, make sure that students have the chance to achieve and work through things on their own. And as I mentioned, there's the whole cybersecurity issue as well. But more to the point, what are the advantages for you? You have the ability to tailor, augment, or translate OER materials to better meet the needs of your students. There is lowered risk of copyright confusion for instructors. You know what you're using, that you can reuse or disseminate what you have in any way, shape, or form if you have OER. So not only do you reduce your risk, you reduce your overall investment in time in thinking about it. And then the ability to label your class as hashtag OER in the course catalog, advertising to students that there are no additional costs for taking your class. That could only help with enrollment, right? That's a good thing for you. But as part of but this also falls under the overall university effort to promote open scholarship. Aligns very well with open access and open source activities, which you may already be engaged in. So it's it's part of the direction that we believe is the future, and clearly the way that things are tipping, given some of the directives that Stephanie has talked about, the recent OSTP memo that came out. There's definitely a sort of tipping point towards open scholarship, which is helpful to us all. And then I'm going to turn it back over to Stephanie to talk about some opportunities for us.
Yeah, so clearly, there are opportunities and support that's really growing, and we have it at, like I said, at the state level, federal level. We have it from higher ed organizations, from universities and colleges. We have it from libraries. And this opportunity is from our statewide academic library consortium that I mentioned before, called CARLI. They actually received a multi-million-dollar grant from the U.S. Department of Education, specifically for developing OERs. And they're entering the second round of competitive sub-grant applications from their governing members, of which Illinois Tech is one. So what that means is there are about think about 90 eligible libraries across the state who can write an application to receive an award of up to $60,000 to support the use of OERs on their campus. And these applications, encourage collaboration. So it might be one institution, or it might be maybe a larger university paired with a community college. Because really the goal is to impact as many students as possible. And so, partnering with other universities or partnering with colleges or departments across your own campus is one way that you would impact a large number of students, and that's what this particular grant is interested in. So this grant supports the adaptation of an open textbook or ancillaries for a course, and then they ask you to use these materials for at least 3 years. So they're looking for courses that are taught at least every year, usually courses that enroll a large number of students. But the nice thing is they're not asking you to write a textbook from scratch. You can locate a textbook that already exists and adapt it specifically for your own course. Or you can just adapt some ancillary materials, such as quizzes or tests or projects that you would assign in that course. And that would be the part of the grant proposal. They're accepting any subject, courses on any subject, although they prefer courses with a large enrollment to make a great impact on the student population. And one of the requirements is a 3D printing assignment. And so this is one way that this grant is using technology and bringing technology into the classroom, asking these particular classes to develop a 3D printing assignment, and then of course teaching the students how to do that and carry it out, so that they're kind of expanding on this particular type of technology across schools in Illinois. And then the last part of the big ask from Carly is that you provide updates and data for 3 years, because they in turn have to report that back to the Department of Education. That's part of the grant. So this is going on right now. Librarians at Illinois Tech are interested in writing an application and submitting it this fall. So if you think you have a course that might fit this criteria very well, if you've been looking to use an open textbook or maybe adapt some new materials for that course, we'd love to talk to you and think about ways that this could align with the grant proposal, and then work with you on hopefully submitting and making that grant happen. So this is just one example, a very immediate, local here in our state example of a way that higher education is really leaning into and maximizing the opportunities that OERs are presenting us. So I think, Devin, if you want to go to the next slide, I'll talk about examples a little bit more. Thank you. So we pulled out a couple examples. These are just a few, and they really demonstrate the wide variety of open materials that you can have access to, but there are many more. So those 2 links at the bottom of the slide, the Galvin Library Research Guide, we have a guide specifically on OER, so you can find many more resources and more information, and it does include information about Creative Commons and copyright there too. And then the A to Z database list, when you go to that list, which you can access from the library's website, there is an option to limit to free and open access materials. So you can find a list of, I think, about 100 resources there on that list that contain free or open material that you can use in courses. So here's just a couple examples. I'm going to run through fairly quickly, and then we can always look at them later, or you can work with your liaison to look at them. First, we have the Mason OER Meta Finder, which is nicknamed MOM. This searches across 23 sources with OER content and includes digital repositories like HathiTrust and Internet Archive, as well as OER repositories that include textbooks like OpenStax. So when you search here, you're not just searching those open textbooks, but you're also searching books that have been digitized. Usually they're out of copyright, or they might be, pieces of in copyright materials that Internet Archive and HathiTrust include. And of course, that also includes things like videos and other content. The Minnesota OER Commons. stores high quality OER from curriculum experts in a variety of subject areas. Again, this includes textbooks, but other materials as well. OpenStax, which we've mentioned a couple times, is part of Rice University, and this repository includes peer-reviewed and openly licensed textbooks, so looking specifically at textbooks here. And their mission is to improve educational access and learning for everyone. Moving on to My Open Math, so specifically mathematics resources here. They include pre-built courses based on open textbooks, and it offers delivery of homework, quizzes, and tests for mathematical courses. So really you can use the materials available here to build an entire course, within the mathematics field, and use or adapt their materials for your students, and the students can access them through that platform as well. And then last, we have MIT OpenCourseWare. This is an open collection of materials from MIT courses and represents the entire MIT curriculum. So if it's a class that's being taught at MIT, you're going to find material that's open and accessible about that course right here in the OpenCourseWare. And all these materials can be shared, modified, remixed, and reused. So it's there readily available for you to adapt and use it for your own courses. So again, these examples just emphasize that OERs are not only textbooks, they're also tools like quizzes, tests, worksheets, study guides, simulations, 3D printing files, videos, and other ancillary materials. So even integrating just one type of that material into your syllabus is offering, affordable access to your students in that way, instead of going to a paid textbook or site where they have to, pay a fee to gain access to the information. So we'll move on to the last slide, which will be a thank you and questions. Devin, do you want to talk about any of the resources on the last slide?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention a quick thing about part of why I've mentioned OpenStax a couple times, because one, I've used it in the Humanities 200 course I taught here, but they actually, they recently found that OpenStax textbooks are used at 3/4 of the higher educational institutions in the US. Which is pretty stunning. And that, a few years ago, I know that something like 1/4 of all physics 100 classes use the OpenStax physics course, which was part of why at the time for the #OER initiative, I argued that, introductory courses are a great place for this to start. As you get more, as the courses move up, in complexity, it gets more difficult sometimes to find OER, but that, especially when you're targeting first and second year retention, those introductory courses, there's good examples there, and it's a good way to make sure that the basics, are covered with the OpenStax type of open education textbooks. And then just going on, I would say, if nothing else, is taken away from this presentation, I would just like to reiterate that we have librarians who are liaisons to each and every academic department, academic unit in the university. Some of our liaisons maintain discipline-specific pages for their area on OERs. If you don't know who your liaison librarian is, look at library.iat.edu, subject specialties, to find out who your person is, and see, what we can do to help you find information to make your life as an instructor easier, and what we can do to collaborate, across the university departments as well, the non-academic units as well. So as these conversations start, these opportunities occur, please reach out to us, work with us. We're here for you. All right, so with that, I'll stop sharing and I'll open it up for questions or discussion. Oh, and I apologize. I was, when I toggled off of Stephanie's slides earlier, I was like, I'm trying to remember an acronym that I'd been talking with about Nick Menhart with, because the state of Illinois has established a college course materials affordability and equitable access task force, which is looking into a variety of textbook options for universities. And OER was one of those. So it's called the CCM task force, and they had a survey that they want us to complete that I was working on with Nick Menhart on, but hopefully we'll get some findings or hear more from that task force in the future.
Hey, Devin and Stephanie, are you guys working with any faculty now on applications for what you were talking about with the Carly grant?
We're not currently working on any applications. We will. There are some like initial calls, I think, that will go out shortly. But we were working with someone. We had identified a couple of different opportunities last year when the first call came out, but it was last year's call was very narrowly defined for that. And this is much more broadly defined. So any academic unit can kind of get involved. And it's not limited to textbooks. If it's problem sets, if it's a lab exercise, if it's 3D printing, as Stephanie said, there are good opportunities for guidebooks or materials or anything that we want to help try and develop. Stephanie, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'll just add, we have a meeting, I think tomorrow in the library to talk about, just talk through some ideas. Like I said in the presentation, the grant really emphasizes large courses, but that's large, in terms of your own campus. So, a large course at the U of I might not be a large course at Dominican, for example. So they'll consider that. But also courses that are taught often, and you always see high enrollment in those courses because that's really going to impact the most students. But yeah, we will be discussing this tomorrow in the library. The application is due in November, so basically it's the month of October that we would be connecting with colleagues on faculty and working, writing this and working through our ideas. There is also, they ask for certain team members as well. For example, a copyright specialist, a 3D printing specialist, a proofreader. And these are all opportunities for either librarians on our side of things or the faculty to get involved on this particular initiative. So, if you are interested or if you have any ideas, there almost certainly is a place for you on the team. And if we are able to, put an application forward, I think it could be a really great opportunity for the university. But if we're not able, at least we would, start making those connections here locally too. And hopefully, be able to maintain some connections and build upon those the next time an opportunity rolls around.
Great, thank you. Anybody else have any other questions for Devin or Stephanie, or any other thoughts on OER? I know I've used OpenStax in one of the courses that I taught, and it was really easy to use and easy to navigate and easy to find what you needed and easy for the students to find what they needed. It was real helpful, I think. And I didn't hear too many complaints about it, so I guess that was a good thing.
Well, and Devin was talking about how he used previous editions when he was an undergrad, and I'm guilty of that in grad school too. I remember when I was in library school, I got all of my materials through interlibrary loan, and I didn't buy anything. And so, I did have the books in most cases, but this is just an example of, the lengths that students have to go to avoid buying materials, because I was a grad student who was living on loans and I didn't have extra money to buy those materials. And that, that's something that so many of our students are experiencing. And I think, oftentimes, sometimes it has to come out of their own pocket and they might not be aware of the price of those materials every semester. So that's something to consider too. It's often, I think maybe one of your charts, Devin, mentioned this, but I know I read that, this is one of the things that students are most concerned about when they go to campus is paying for these materials out of their pocket. So any way we can alleviate that and help them to start, all with the same materials in hand on the first day is going to be a benefit to them.
Yes, yeah, I think that was in a recent presentation that I attended on OER. I think you were there as well, that they mentioned a recent survey in which textbook costs were like the second or third most stressful thing in terms of costs for the students, which I think is, that's significant. Like I said, I think those textbook costs, because they're last, because they're not covered by other things, they are just especially stressful and in sort of an outsized way that we don't always think through intentionally. Yeah, excellent.
Yeah. And students might not necessarily always realize that those are going to be additional costs, right? I mean, especially like if they've gone to a public school, or if they, where they're in high school, wherever they're in high school, their teachers are using all sorts of stuff and just, copying things and handing them out and not using books and stuff like that too, or using OER there as well. So they kind of have that expectation that, they're ready to go on their first day, and then they get the list and they're like, wait a minute, what do you mean?
And it's and especially for a lot of our international grad students, some of my most I'll say I think it's safe to say unpleasant interactions with new international grad students have had to do around the fact that they are coming from countries that have a textbook library for like all graduate students to use. As just the way that it happens in their country, and they come here and they're like, what do you mean I have to find these books? What do you mean I have to order all these books for myself? And they become like, the library is the point at which we are like saying no to them for the first time, and they're beginning to comprehend the like additional costs that they are incurring for this education for the very first time. So it is something that I have seen very close up and personally.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Is there any, I know we don't have a lot of folks here, but are there any other questions or anything? We do have a little bit of time left, so I don't want to cut anybody short if there are questions and things, but at the same time, if there aren't, we can always use with an extra 10 minutes in our day, I suppose. Yeah, I see Stephanie posted her email in the chat. Thank you very much, and Devin as well. So if you have any more questions on OER, please go ahead and send them to them, find them, and let them know about that. Also, please keep in mind our upcoming faculty lounges are coming up, I think, in another couple of weeks, right? Carol, I believe you are going to be part of the next one that is being talked about.
Yeah, it's in 2 weeks, but it's on a Thursday.
Okay. And what's it about?
Using games as an instructional tool.
Okay, great. So in 2 weeks, hopefully we will see folks and back here for that. But thank you all very much in the meantime, and hopefully have a good afternoon and a good day.
Thanks, everybody.
I'll
Thanks,
stop the
Devin
recording.
and Stephanie.
Thank you.
Very interesting talk.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.